Alrighty, everyone. So this is your video for March 18th. That's Wednesday. We're going to go over the industrial inventors a bit. And then your task for today is to, in the Factory Life essay doc, work through the questions about documents A through D. Your task for Thursday is going to be to write that essay about those same things. Here's what to expect. I thought it was good to sort of bring it up. There will be a sort of a daily task, and when I can, I'll try to split those up so they're over multiple days in smaller chunks. There'll be a video you watch, usually of me talking through something, and then there'll be a Google form or quiz to kind of cover what's in the video, make sure you're watching them all the way through. These will be graded mostly for completion for the district's sake, because they want me to make sure I have something every day that I check off. They will not be graded based on how well you do on them. Today we're going to go over the inventions and inventors a bit, as well as set you up for looking at the working conditions in the Factory Life essay. Once again, we're looking at the period from 1750 to 1850 in the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to try to do this video thing in a different set. Let's just see here if I can pause this. Alright, so the first inventor is a dude named James Watt. James Watt actually improved on the steam engine. The steam engine was first developed by a guy named Thomas Newcomen. And what Watt realized is that the steam engine that he developed was super inefficient. It would blow steam up a piston, but then you would have to wait for it to cool to come back down, which meant it had this sort of like push up and then wait for it to cool down, this backward sort of seesawing motion. What Watt realizes he could do something better with what's called a rotary steam engine. And in this case, what would happen with the rotary steam engine is that there would be a boiler on the side, over here on the left-hand side, and that boiler on the left-hand side would pump steam into the piston, and the piston would actually pump steam into the bottom to push its piston up, and then it would pump steam into the top to push it down. So that meant it was going much faster. At the same time, there was also a wheel that allowed for continuous motion, so this was a much more efficient machine. Okay, so now I should be able to access this again. Alright, so once again, this is like the Thomas Newcomen one. Again, it would like sort of boil water upwards. It would push up, and then you'd wait for it to come back down, and that was pretty inefficient. Watts, which pushed steam into both the bottom to push it up, and down to push it down. That was much more efficient, plus the wheel rotating around meant that there was constant motion. Now, you might not think that you see many steam engines today, and you don't, but nuclear power plants and actually coal-fired power plants actually are still technically steam engines to this day. The next inventor was Richard Arkwright. He invented what's called the water frame, which was a way to spin yarn or thread faster by using water power and multiple sort of bobs at the same time. So it goes from the top up here down there into actual thread. You don't see water wheel powered stuff all the time today with thread and textiles, but the basic way in which they were designed is still used today by modern electrical frames for spinning thread. Railroads are super interesting. Most of you probably don't ride on a railroad to this day, but they've affected your lives in more ways than you know. Railroads were known as the annihilators of time and space because more people could travel more often, faster and farther. Before the railroads, the way most people understood travel was you would walk from your village, and whenever you got tired, that was a long way and a long day. But they changed our relation with that. First, it changed our idea of nature from a 3D thing we walked through to something we looked at. It flattened the land. And a lot of people actually think that our way of looking through the world moving by on railroads prepared people for movies, because it's a lot of the same thing if you think about it. It's a frame you're looking through the whole time. It allowed regular people to have vacations to realize the world was much more than just their village. Developed our first ideas of motion sickness because people would get dizzy by it moving 20 miles an hour. And it also gave us social trends. Before this, if you got to travel, you would go on a stagecoach, and you would spend your time in the stagecoach talking to people. If you did not like each other, you had about an inch to move away from somebody. Not that great. But as railroads happen, people stop talking to each other because they realize that the travel time is pretty short. Instead, they do games or they read. And so in a lot of ways, the way in which we avoid people by looking at our phones is based on earlier trends in railroads. And again, this meant that sometimes travel, which in a stagecoach would take you 24 hours, would now take you 6 hours with a train. That meant that you could leave early in the morning, get up to a place, have meetings, and get back for dinner, which changes drastically how we think about distance. I'm going to linger on this for a second. Railroads also gave us time zones. Before this, usually each town set their own time zone, but after railroads, we need to have times coordinated, or there's more likelihood of having these different crashes happen. So they had to have time zones because of railroads. The last guy, Thomas Cook, he actually develops industrial tourism by taking people using these railroads and steam engine powered ships on these tours of Europe. And actually, tourism as a whole industry still exists to this day, including Thomas Cook, which is still a tourist agency. It was for a while an airline. It is no longer, though. That closed in 2019. Now, your daily task today is going to be around looking at life in the factory system of England. I'm going to make sure that I'm still recording. Good, I am still recording. Let's hope that this worked fine. First time didn't work. So the factory system first started in the 1750s. It was these large buildings, even sometimes complexes of buildings, like a bunch of buildings all together, that were involved in mass-producing goods using water or steam power, eventually using lots of the steam engines. And you can see these things up here at the top. Those are basically the crankshafts there are going to the steam engines. And then these are big giant bands that would turn on the cranks and then turn the different machines. It often featured low and unskilled labor that was meant to jump into these machines, fix things, make sure things kept moving. And it lowered the cost of goods for everyone because of the mass production element. It shortened the time. Now, in the second half of the Industrial Revolution from 1800 to 1850, some people become concerned about life in these factories. Many in terms of protecting children, including the Factory Act of 1833, which limited how much children could work and also limited what age children could start work. Before this, children from a very early age could work in factories. After this, those who were under 9 had to go to school, and only those between 9 and 16 could be considered kids who were working. What's interesting is that there's a lot of these different sort of commissions that are launched to investigate conditions in factories. Some people who support these reforms and some people who are against these changes. And your task for today is to look at some of these reports and information about working conditions in these factories, answer the questions. Then your task for Thursday will be to answer this historical question. Were textile factories bad for the health of English workers? Was this really necessary, or were these reforms all kind of a bunch of bunk? Thanks for watching this, and make sure you fill out the form about this. Alrighty, here we go.